John 21 is one of my favourite passages from the Bible. Breakfast on the beach. And I think it's a favourite because it speaks to the experience that we recognise, an experience that comes close to our most uncomfortable truth. Because it's about failing, it's about shame, it's about feeling humiliated. It's about not getting it right. It's about being vulnerable. It's about not coping. It's about struggle. It's about, in other words, being absolutely human. And so we recognise ourselves in this wonderful story of breakfast on the beach. It's a passage which is so authentic. It's one in which I recognise my own experience, and indeed the experience of the church. It's a strange story in some ways, because it's after the resurrection, it's after Easter, and yet, rather than being energised and together and full of purpose and life and hope and love, the disciples seem disorganised, disoriented. They seem hopeless. They just don't know what to do, and that's where we meet them in this story. It's a strange story in some ways, because it's after the resurrection. They've met Jesus twice, the disciples, in the upper room. They've been blessed by him. He's breathed his spirit into them. He's sent them to Galilee to go ahead. And yet, here they are, seemingly not knowing what to do next. It's really curious. You would have thought by now they would have had all the passion that you see in the Acts of the Apostles, that great energy bursting out, people being converted, brought to faith, miracles happening. But there's none of it in this story, to begin with. You've just got this group of seemingly confused and bewildered disciples reverting to what they know best. And that's where we find Peter. Dear Peter. He decides to go fishing. It's the one thing he knows that he can do. It's the one thing that gives him a sense of identity and self-belief. And so when everything else is unclear and he's struggling, he goes fishing. He does what we do when we're like that. We revert to the things which give us meaning and purpose and at least some sense of self-worth and confidence. We go back to our comfort zone. And that's precisely what Peter does. He goes to his comfort zone. And so he takes his friends and they go fishing. It's a great idea. It's his comfort zone. It's perhaps what he would naturally do when he's struggling. Except this time, it doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. They spend the whole night fishing and they catch nothing. Not a single fish. Just think how devastating that is. Not one fish. The thing that's supposed to give you comfort, the thing that's supposed to increase your sense of worth and self-belief, does the exact opposite. You're humiliated, you're ashamed, and you're still stuck in your confusion. They go out onto the sea, expecting, no doubt, to feel good about themselves, to have success, to come back with nets brimming with fish. But that, of course, isn't what happens. Far from it. The exact opposite, in fact. What should have been a triumph becomes a humiliating failure. It's dreadful. All night, and they catch nothing. Not a solitary fish. Just imagine what that must have felt like. And after a whole night of failing, A whole night of not feeling better about yourselves. A whole night of just feeling worse with each hour that passes. And that's where Jesus appears. For they hear a voice from the shore at daybreak, after a whole night of failing. They hear a voice. What's it going to say? Not what you might expect. For the voice says, "You haven't caught anything, have you?" He tells them the truth. And John's Gospel is the truth-telling Gospel. For the truth, says Jesus, will set you free. And this is the truth that's meant to set them free. This is the truth which will enable them to move forward and change the world with faith and hope and love. You've not caught anything. For a long time the church has felt like that we've not caught anything. That despite our best efforts, year on year, we just have this sense that it's not working. We find ourselves in the boat, on the sea, listening to his voice, speaking to us. That truth. And we carry on doing what we've done in the way that we've always done, putting the nets where we've always put them, and it doesn't work. And we blame the fish. But Jesus offers a different way. He says, put the nets over the other side. And in that instant, in that moment, there is revelation and hope and excitement. He's asking them to take a risk and do something completely outside their experience. It's counterintuitive. Do this, he says. And it's not an invitation, it's an instruction. And they do it. And they catch 153 fish. A huge haul, more than they could have ever hoped for. And at that moment, they recognise it's Jesus. At that moment, when they've heard, they've listened, they've accepted, they've understood, and they've obeyed, they see it's him. And that's the pattern we recognise. At our lowest ebb, when all's gone wrong and we're dejected, he speaks into that truth, and with words of love he offers us a way through. Breakfast on the beach is a powerful story. And they recognise it's him, the beloved disciple. "It's the Lord," he shouts. And Peter jumps out of the boat and goes to meet Jesus. And Jesus has got breakfast ready for them. He's prepared it. It's there. Typically thoughtful and kind and welcoming and embracing as ever. He's prepared breakfast for this little group of people who only a few hours ago had got little hope. And he's encouraged them. He's brought them together with a sense of identity and purpose. He asked them to bring the fish that they've caught. Bring what you have. Bring your gifts, all of you. And that's what he always says to us. Come as you are. Bring what you have. We'll make a feast together. A feast for the whole world. And that's what we need. To come together in truth and love and full of hope. Come and feast with him and know once more the depth of his love and whose we are and what he wants us to be. In our agape, he invites us to bring what we have, and he will transform it. And he will bring us together, separate though we are, bring us as one, as a church, listening to his truth and his love, a church looking to the future with hope and confidence, filled with the Spirit. Breakfast on the beach is a pivotal moment for those disciples. It takes them from a hopeless place to a place full of the energy of the Acts of the Apostles. And that's where he takes us too. if we can but listen to his truth and do what he says. Breakfast on the beach is where our future lies, and it lies with the risen Christ, full of love, inviting us to feast.